Thank you, folks, for everyone who is joining. I'd like to just give a few quick tips on using WebEx and the WebEx logistics. All lines will be muted on entry. Please submit your comments in chat using the Q&A and chat panel and select all panelists. You may need to activate the appropriate panel using the menu found in the lower center of your screen. A closed captioning link will be available momentarily within the chat panel. Please click on that if you do need closed captioning. Please note this webinar is being recorded and will be posted online at a later date. We will be demoing some software. So if you have any issues seeing the screen, please select the plus and minus signs and they can zoom in and zoom out. Thank you. And with that, I will pass it over to Nadia Howlader.
Thank you, Jennifer. Welcome, everybody. Today, I'll be talking to you about SEER and SEERStat Overview. Quickly, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Nadia Howlader. I'm an epidemiologist and a statistician in the Surveillance Research Program, which houses the SEER data. Slide is not advancing, but let me try something. There you go. Here is an outline of the topics we are going to cover today. First, I'm going to start with an introduction to SEER and give some examples of analysis using the SEER data. Then I'll hand it over to Steve Scoppa and Don Green from the IMS, and they will be talking about SEERStat overall and give a demo of the SEERStat software, which we use to analyze the SEER data. Very briefly, SEER's mission is to support research on cancer diagnosis, treatment, and outcomes. And we have been doing that since 1973. You'll see that the data that we make available for research use begins actually from 75 as opposed to 73 for consistencies of data across registries. The main mission of SEER is to provide baseline data on US cancer incidence and survival trends. These are population-based registries representing almost about a third of the US population. And currently, we capture information over 500,000 incident cancer cases annually. Data quality is an important part of keeping data consistent, and SEER does a lot of quality control work to produce a reliable and high quality source for cancer statistics. The North American Association of Central Cancer Registries, NCI briefly, issues certifications for data qualities for different registries. For example, some of the factors or criteria they use for determining whether a registry is high quality or not are factors such as whether case ascertainment was 95% or higher completeness. Very few cases should be reported from death certificate data only, so less than 3% or so cases should come from death certificates, because if we have a lot of cases from death certificates, we obviously would not have a lot of information on follow-up and subsequent information on those cases. So we want to minimize those. We also want to ensure that the cases have a few missing information on important data or variables such as demographics, age, sex, county, etc. And as I said earlier, because we collect information on such a large volume of cancer cases, over 500,000 or so per year, there is a 3-year lag between diagnosis year and the reporting of cancer year. So, for example, for November 1st, 2020 data submission, or the data that's currently available, cases diagnosed through 2018. So that will be the latest year for which the cases will be diagnosed, and the data will be released on April 15 of 2021. Here is a map of US with the SEER registry shown, and I will talk in the next slide how SEER has evolved over time to capture more population in the US. As one can see that the states that are marked in red, blue, or green are the SEER regions, and the rest of the states where it's gray, there are also population-based cancer registries in those states, but they're supported by the CDC program, not the NCI SEER program. But together, SEER and CDC program, we have cancer information for close to 100% of the US population today. So SEER has evolved over time. The original set of registries that SEER started with were 9 registries for whom we have actually historic data going back to 1975 onward. And with the original 9 registries, we captured about 9.4% of the US population. In 1992, SEER expanded and added a few more registries, as one can see listed here. With those registries added, the population coverage went from 9.4% to 13.4%. And then in 2000, SEER expanded again to add California, Kentucky, Louisiana, New Jersey, and some parts of Georgia states. And with that, the coverage went up to 28% of the US population. And recently in 2018, we expanded again. With that, our coverage went up to 36.7% of the US population. And just this year, we have added on more registries. And with that, we are going to cover close to half of the US population. Just to note that the data that is currently available in the SEERStat software is based on the registries that were expanded in 2018. So the new registries that were added into 2021, the data is not available in SEERStat and will be available sometime in the near future. So in this graph, we're showing the different segments of the population coverage by race ethnic groups. As one can see with SEER 9, we covered about 9% of the population overall. And of course, it varied by different race ethnic groups. But as we move from 9 to 21, we have a bigger and bigger portion of the population we are covering. And what's interesting to note here is if one is interested in studying cancer burden or cancer risk in minority populations such as American Indian, Alaskan Native, or Asian populations, we cover right now with our SEER 21 about half or more of that population. So it's a very rich source of data for studying cancer burden and risk in those minority populations. We have very rich sources of data in the registries. In terms of demographics information, we have information on a cancer patient's age, gender, race, ethnicity, marital status. We have also a lot of information around the time of diagnosis on their cancer, starting from primary cancer site to histology, morphology. And we are starting cancer stage, and we are getting all kinds of biomarkers data on the tumor. So one is able to look at not just by cancer by primary organ site, but by subtypes, which are important for understanding treatment and prognosis. In terms of treatment, we are collecting information on first course of chemotherapy, radiation therapy, surgery. We also have information on cancer patient outcomes. For example, whether somebody is dead or alive, the causes of death, and the month and year of death. SEER currently doesn't have individual level socioeconomic status information on the cancer patients. However, we link at the county level with census data. and provide a very rich set of information on county level SES types of information, whether, for example, poverty level of somebody living in that county, educational level, etc. So all of this data is consolidated and is available for analysis in SEER Stat, as you will see very soon. We have some of our statistics calculated using SEER Stat readily available for different audiences. So for example, we have some fact sheets which have plain language summaries of key statistics by cancer site, and we have provided the link for the fact sheets here. We also have a very a nice tool called the SEER Explorer, where one could go in and pull out statistics for a particular cancer of interest in terms of incidence, mortality, prevalence, those types of statistics. We also have a very nice tool called State Cancer Profiles, which have interactive maps to assess, to look at clusters or counties where certain cancer rates might be high or low compared to other counties. And we also put out this paper every year in a peer-reviewed journal called Annual Report to the Nation, in collaboration with other partner agencies such as the CDC, the American Cancer Society, the NACER, where we provide an annual update on cancer incidence, mortality, and trends using data from both SEER and CDC funded registries. So almost for close to 100%, close to using all of the states' population-based registry cancer data. These are the typical statistics we report using SEER data. So we report incidence rates per 100,000. We also calculate trends in incidence rates, and we show it using a summary measure called the annual percent change in rates, or the average annual percent change in rates over a specific time. So like, if you're interested in looking at a cancer, whether in the recent 5 years that cancer incidence is going up or down, that could be summarized and understood using these trend measures. We also calculate prevalence of people alive with the previous diagnosis of cancer in the latest calendar period. Because we have data on, we have information on cancer patients follow-up and cause of death, we are able to calculate survival statistics. And finally, we have information on probability of developing or dying of cancer given over a lifetime period. So now I'm going to show you an example of a study using SEER data. This is a study we have published actually in the New England Journal of Medicine this past year. The title of the study is The Effect of Advances in Lung Cancer Treatment on Population Mortality. So to give you a little bit of background on this study, here is a graph shown to the left, which shows death rates from lung cancer in the US between men and women going from 1975 to 2017. And one can see from this graph that death rates from lung cancer has been declining rapidly in the US population. And actually, American Cancer Society reported one of the largest one-year drop in cancer mortality that year, this past year. And they concluded that decline in deaths from lung cancer alone drove this record drop we saw in overall cancer mortality. Of course, this graph to the left here shows overall trend from all the different subtypes of lung cancer combined. And what we really wanted to understand is how much do specific lung cancer subtype contribute to this overall trend in mortality. So when we partition the mortality trend by the subtypes, we looked at two subtypes, non-small cell lung cancer subtype and small cell lung cancer subtype. And in this graph, we are showing you incidence, mortality, and survival trends for non-small cell lung cancer patients in men and women. And what we found that we saw accelerated sort of death rates going down in doubling rate from 2013 onward for non-small cell lung cancer, which sort of corresponded with the timing of when some of the targeted treatments were approved by the FDA. And as one can see, survival also improved a lot in this patient population during that time. When we looked at the trends for small cell lung cancer, we saw that something interesting, which is that lung cancer for non-small cell patient population were declining, but survival was almost always flat in this patient population during this time period. And there has been very little improvements in therapy for treating this patient population. Lack of improvement we saw here. So the conclusion of the study was that for small cell lung cancer, we saw a steady decline in mortality, which was explained almost entirely by incidence declining. And there was very little improvement in survival outcomes among this patient population. And for non-small cell, we saw a steady decline initially, followed by a doubling or a rapid decline from 2013 through 2016. And this was explained by dissemination of targeted therapies that were approved around 2013 for stage 4 EGFR positive non-small cell lung cancer cases. And these estimates suggested a possible first-time population level impact of targeted therapy that were introduced for this patient population. So with that, I think I will stop here, and we will wait to do question and answer a little bit later. And I will hand it over to my colleague, Steve Scoppa. And thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thanks, Nadia and Jennifer, for that. I'm going to start out with a PowerPoint also, and then I'm going to jump into using SEERStat. And be warned, I'm using an alpha version of SEERStat, so it could be fun, although I have practiced them and it does seem to be working. So before I get started, I just want to introduce myself. As Nadia said, my name's Steve Scoppa. I work with Information Management Services, and Don Green and I worked on this PowerPoint together and the exercises. And Don is a coworker of mine at IMS. We're contractors for the National Cancer Institute, and we are both senior systems analysts at IMS. And we've both been here for much too long, I should say, for many, many years. So I will get started, as I said, with some PowerPoint, and then we will jump into looking at SEERStat. So let me share my screen if I'm not already. Start up my PowerPoint. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. Jennifer, please let me know if not, but I believe I am. So what is the purpose of SEERStat? Well, SEERStat was developed to provide cancer researchers with a convenient and intuitive system for producing statistics useful in studying the impact of cancer on a population and creating analytic data sets of calculated statistics to be analyzed with other tools that we make available, like DevCan and JoinPoint. We're not getting into those, but it's important to note that you can export statistics calculated by SEERStat to use for other tools, and you can export the data, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. So you can view and export the data for analysis into other software, and that's SEERStat currently is the mechanism to get access to the SEER data in any form. So what type of data are analyzed by SEERStat? And when you get SEERStat, you would also get access to SEER incidence databases. It's separate, but you would most likely do that. So you can use the SEER incidence data for calculating incidence rates, survival statistics, prevalence statistics, and many other types of statistics, which I'll cover briefly. You can also take your own data, whether it's cancer incidence data or some other types of data, put it into SEERStat using the SEER prep software and analyze it. Also, we make available mortality databases, and these are population-based mortality databases, all deaths in the United States, and they're just from death certificate data. And I did want to point out that Nadia showed very cool graphs of mortality statistics by histologic subtype of lung cancer. Mortality data does not have histologic subtype of lung cancer. So what she used was something called incidence-based mortality. And incidence-based mortality is different, and we may cover that in a future webinar, but it is a little different, it's a little trickier. It's using the incidence data and the cause of death information. It's not population-based, it's only for those patients in the cancer registry. So that's important differentiation. So our mortality databases are population-based. They have every death in the United States from 1969 through 2019. And as I said, they cover all causes of death, not just cancer deaths. So also in the SEERStat software, we have population data. So we have census population data that's available as standalone databases, available in frequency sessions. And we also, when we have incidence or mortality databases, we link the population data to the numerator data to make it available to produce rates or prevalence statistics. And when we're doing that linking behind the scenes, we're linking the populations by age, sex, race, year of diagnosis, and geography. So those are the people at risk. When you're producing a SEER incidence rate, you need populations, census populations for people at risk of getting cancer in those areas. And because these are census populations, we have to consider what's available. And prior to 1990, the population data were only available for white, black, and all other races combined. Starting with 1990, they started becoming available with additional races. And that affects what races you can produce rates by in the SEER data. The incidence, the numerator data, has detailed rates and can be used for some things. But when linking to population and producing rates, it's dictated by the years of data. So the SEER databases at a glance. Nadia kind of covered some of this, but we have SEER 9 starting with 1975 and the population coverage of SEER 13 and 18 and 21. And you can see the race and ethnicity. So we have races of white, black, and other. And again, that's the populations that limit what's available. So it's only when doing rates that this is really the issue. So we have white, black, other, and we don't have Hispanic ethnicity. And then when we get into later years, because those databases start after 1990, we have 4 races, white, black, Asian Pacific Islander, and American Indian Alaska Native by Hispanic, which is Hispanic and non-Hispanic. So it's 8 race ethnic combinations. One fairly big change we made starting with the data through 2017, so the November 2019 data released, not this past April, but the prior, was that we now have 2 separate primary data products, SEER Research data and SEER Research Plus data. We used to just have the SEER Research data, and now we split it into 2, and the changes were motivated because of concerns about increasing risk of identifiability, easy for me to say, of individuals. And the Research Plus data requires a little bit more rigorous process for access. That includes user authentication, not just I have a valid email address, but a little bit more information. You have to make a few more acknowledgements to get access to that. So the research databases have fewer fields. They have the same number of tumor records, things like that, but they have fewer fields. And the fields that are excluded from the research data are excluded for 2 different reasons: confidentiality, things like county, and really any geographic identifier, not just county, month of diagnosis, single ages beyond 84. We actually, in the Research Plus, we go up through age 99, which helps if you're looking at median age or things like that. Marital status, those are all things that could help identify an individual, so we want to be a little more restrictive. And then also for complexity or limitations in the ways the variables could be analyzed or interpreted. The treatment fields, which are underreported, and it's just important to really understand those. And we want people to make sure they have a good understanding of these fields before using them. So the Research Plus databases, while they provide access to all of these extra variables, not all of those extra variables are available when you're looking at the individual tumor records. And the ones that aren't are ones that there's too much concern over identifiability. So some of the fields are not available in the case listing session. We'll talk about the different sessions, but when looking at individual tumor records, but they are available when doing statistics. You can look at rates by county, but you can't look at the county at the individual level. So in SEERStat, there are many SEERStat databases, and you'll see when you get access nowadays, you just get 3 submissions of data. You used to get many. Right now, you get the 3 most recent. And all of the databases that we release in these recent submissions, there's a research version and a research plus version. They're very similar. It's just the extra fields. If you have access to research plus, you also have research. So you need to make sure you're in the research plus database to get the extra fields. And this kind of goes into a little bit what Nadia covered also. So we have SEER 9, the years, what the population coverage is, number of tumor records, so 5.5 million tumors, and it has the registries included and the race that's available for population and for rate calculations. SEER 13, shorter time period, a little bit larger population coverage, and you see it's similar number of records. It just added in Los Angeles, San Jose, Monterey, rural Georgia, and the Alaska Native Tumor Registry, which is unique. That is only Alaska Natives in Alaska, one race. It is not all people in the state of Alaska. In the MPsir data, Nadia talked about the combined USCS, there's the total state registry, but the registry in SEER is just the Alaska Natives. And then we can see the race and ethnic groupings. And then we get into SEER 18, which again, much larger population coverage, many more tumors. We added in Greater California, which means now we have the total state of California, Kentucky, Louisiana, New Jersey, and Greater Georgia, which means we have the entire state of Georgia. And the races, and then we get to SEER 21 with this extra expansion, and our population coverage goes up significantly. Number of tumor records goes up. We added Idaho, Massachusetts, and New York. And you might ask, well, why even bother with SEER 18? And it's this bottom bullet here. That's the reason. The number of fields released is very limited compared to what's released in SEER 9, SEER 13, and SEER 18. And the statistics that you can use these data to calculate currently, hopefully that's going to change in the near future, but currently SEER 21 is not available in survival or prevalence or some other session types. And we're moving towards that and potentially releasing more fields, but there are fewer fields because these registries didn't collect many of the data items because they weren't part of SEER yet, and SEER has extra data items. Other databases that you can get through SEERStat without creating them yourself using SEER Prep are you can get access to SENA Plus databases through NASER, and there's a public use version that's very easy to get, and there's Researcher, where they create a specialized database for researchers, and you can read about that on the NASER website. And there's the USCS public use database, which is NPsir plus SEER data, as Nadia mentioned, which covers, I don't know if it's the entire US, I think it is. If not, I think it is. And it's got data from SEER for the registries that are not also NPsir registries, and then the NPsir registries. And you have to have SEER Research Plus access, since there is SEER data in it, and it does contain geography and month of diagnosis. You have to have SEER Research Plus access for that submission of data before you can get access to the USCS public use data. And as I mentioned, the total US mortality databases. And those you don't apply for once you get a SEERStat account by applying for SEER access. Those just come along for the ride. And we have those all deaths from 69 to 2019. And just like with the incidents, they're linked to populations. So there's limitations on the race variable. So 69 plus, it's the 3 races. And then once you get to 1990 plus, we have the extra race category and the Hispanic origin. And these are available at the county level with grouped year of death, at the state level with individual year of death. and NCHS requires suppression based on cases if there's fewer than 10 deaths. So SEERStat automatically suppresses those statistics. So today, as I mentioned, I'm going to be showing a new version of SEERStat, an alpha version, which is a total redesign of the interface. It has a lot of similar, it's similar, but it's going to look a lot different. And why did we want a new version? Well, SEERStat's 25 years old. I mentioned Don and I have been here for quite a while, and we both were here before the first version of SEERStat was released, and we worked on and developed the first version of SEERStat, and it hasn't changed a lot. We've added, but it still looks a lot like it did back then. The current version is 32-bit software, which is kind of antiquated. Most applications now are 64-bit. The tools that we use to build SEERStat are not really being supported, and soon they won't be available. And we're scared that at some point, the current version of SEERStat will no longer work in your new version of Windows, and we don't want to get to that point. So we needed a new version. And we wanted the interface to look a little bit more modern, except Microsoft Office releases a new version every 2 weeks with a total new look and feel. We do it every 25 years. So we're not quite what they're doing, but it's going to look a little bit more like things like Office do now in most applications that you're using. We're doing the rebuild, the redevelopment in 2 phases. First one, which is what we're doing now, what we're showing is a new interface, the client application. So it's going to look different. Behind the scenes, it's calling the same servers. All the calculations are the same. So if your session is working and it sends it to the server properly, all the results are identical. Some of the features that we've added is we've added graphing in. We've been asked for 25 years about adding graphing into SEERStat, and we always said, go to Excel or some other software, and we finally got around to adding it. And we've got some other changes to the look and feel and the flow, and they're all really nice. Some of you might take a little bit of time to get used to it if you've been using SEERStat for a while, like Don and I, again, I'll say. And then phase 2 is we're going to completely redevelop the calculation engine. We're going to convert all of our databases from the format that they're currently in, which is a proprietary format that we developed, into a standard relational database. We're going to have the new client then built into 64-bit, and it's all going to be 64-bit. We're going to have a completely new version of SEER Prep, which will create new databases in the new format, and we will have a utility to take the databases you've created and convert them from the old SEERStat database format to the new SEERStat database format, because we know that's critical. So some of the improvements with this phase are, it's an SDI interface, single document interface. And in the old version, it was a multiple document interface. And many people might not have any clue what that means. So the difference being, in the old version, you had a SEERStat window, and everything you did in SEERStat was contained within that window. You could have many different sessions and matrix files opened within SEERStat, but they're all contained within that window. With an SDI, each thing you're doing in SEERStat, a different session, different sessions, different matrix files, results, just like in Excel and others at this point, they're all standalone, separate, their own windows. They're not contained within this wrapper. We've added graphs. We're going to be adding more graphing features, but for now we just have some basic graphing, and I think we'll see some today, and they look, I think, great. They can be exported. As we said, some improvements in the interface. It looks a lot different, but functionally, there's only a couple of real changes. In the case selection, you're making selections, that's functionally different. It feels different when you're doing it. It takes a little getting used to if you have used the old version, but once you've done it for a little bit, it's very intuitive and really nice. And it prevents you from making easy to make mistakes that you could do with the old version. And selecting a database or changing a database. We made that a lot nicer, I think. And as I said, it's going to look more like modern interfaces. So when we're working with SEERStat, and this is, I know I looked at some of the participants, some of you have used SEERStat a lot, so this is old news. I'm sure some of you, this is not. there's two main things in SEERStat. You have a session window, which is where you define the parameters of a session of an analysis, and then you execute that, and then you get a matrix file, the results. And the matrix file looks like a spreadsheet, and you have things like viewing, printing. We didn't add graphing here because that's new, but graphing, exporting, copying it to paste into other software. We'll go over all of those today, except for printing. And the different session types in SEERStat that you're working with are set up for different types of things. Case listing. So if I want to take the data and analyze it in Stata, I would use a case listing session, select the data, tumor records, the fields of interest, export the data, and then read it into Stata or into SAS or whatever I want to read it into. There's also different session types, frequencies, which I'm going to go into each one of these in a little more detail, so I'm not going to spend much time. Rates, and we're going to cover today case listings, frequencies, and rates. Very whirlwind because it's only 2 hours, but we're going to go over those three today, and then survival, which there's a lot in survival, and because of that, we have an entire 2-hour webinar coming up on October 28th for that. And then we have limited duration prevalence, multiple primary standardized incidence ratios, left truncated life tables. I'll go over into those briefly in a minute. We currently don't have any webinars scheduled for any of those. I'm sure we will. We're just not sure when, if it'll be in the spring. Besides the survival webinar, just to put out a mention that we are going to have 2 others coming up besides these 2, and one's more on the data elements and using the data for analyses, as opposed to just what's the best fields to collect at this time for the data. And then the last one is on delay adjustment and join point software. So those are coming up, I think, both the first week of November. So each session type I'm going to just talk briefly about. So in the frequency session, you can calculate frequencies or counts, and you can include row or column percentages. You can't get both at the same time. And frequencies and case listings are unique in the sense that they allow you to define your cohort based on a person's cancer history. So you can select, you can analyze how many people have had a lung cancer followed by a breast cancer, or with at least 2 additional cancer diagnoses of any kind following their lung cancer. So you can use special selections in these session types. The rate session, you can calculate crude, not adjusted rates, or age-adjusted rates. You can calculate trends over time expressed as percent change and annual percent change based on crude, which typically isn't recommended, or age-adjusted rates. Generally, the population is aging over time. The rates, crude rates will be going up, but not because of the cancer so much, just because older people for most cancer sites tend to get more cancer. So typically, we're going to use age-adjusted rates whenever, almost all rates, we do age-adjusted, unless we're looking at very age-specific groupings, individual ages or 5-year age groups, where there we wouldn't necessarily age-adjust them. And trends over time, while SEERStat can do it, looking at any kind of long-term trends over time, we don't recommend using SEERStat for. We recommend taking that and going to join point, because SEERStat, you say, okay, I want to look at trends for a long period. It might be going up and down like the mortality rates Nadia was saying, and SEERStat would try to fit a single line across that data. Where join point would say, okay, well, it's going up and then it's going back down. And we do have the join point webinar. I think it's November 4th, but I'm sure you all received the email. So definitely recommend that one. And then SEERStat can also calculate rate ratios, which is just looking at a rate over another rate and seeing if they're significantly different from each other. Case listing session, as I said before, that it creates a table showing the actual values from the database. It provides a mechanism for displaying individual cancer records and patient history. So you can look at all tumors for each person in the data that you selected. And you can select based on the values of the fields. You can select, as I mentioned earlier, based on the history, the cancer history of the patient, pick which variables you want. You can sort the results, and then you export it to use in other software. And that's probably the most common use of the case listing, is to export it to analyze in other software. Survival session, again, we have a whole webinar, so it can calculate observed or all-cause survival. So you have a cohort what's the survival of them from all causes. Can also calculate two different types of net cancer survival, or the survival in the absence of other causes. It's kind of hypothetical, not real world, but that's what we use for looking for surveillance. How is cancer survival changing, trying to ignore changes in other cause survival over time. And that's relative survival, which uses expected survival, and cause-specific survival, which uses cause of death instead of expected survival. SEERStat can also calculate crude survival measures. So that's competing risks in real life survival. So a person can die of the cancer, they can die of other causes, or they can survive. And that can be calculated two ways, just like net survival can be calculated with life tables or cause of death. And we can calculate conditional survival. So what's the probability of surviving 5 years given already survived 3 years? Period survival, which looks at the most current, most recent available follow-up time instead of following people from the beginning when they're diagnosed, just looking at follow-up over a shorter duration, more recent time period, and then age standardized, which is very common outside the United States and even some groups in the United States. Most of the SEER statistics that you'll see are still not age standardized, but it is available. Prevalence session. So in SEERStat, we can calculate limited duration prevalence statistics. So counts, percentages, age adjusted. So it's the number of people alive at a given point in time that have previously been diagnosed with a cancer. And in SEERStat, it's previously diagnosed within the past X years. And the X is dependent on the number of years of data that you're working with. If you're working with SEER 18, and you're calculating prevalence on January 1st of 2018, we have diagnoses back to January 1st of 2000. So it's 2000 to 2017 diagnoses. So it's 18-year limited duration prevalence. The statistics you would calculate in SEERStat would be SEER statistics, not US, and they wouldn't have information about real long-term survivors, people that were diagnosed 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And the ComPrev software can be used for completing the prevalence to turn it from limited duration to complete. And the ProjPrev software is what we use. We just project SEER prevalence proportions to US populations by race, age, and sex to estimate US prevalence counts. And those are just tools that we have available also, and potentially would have a webinar for in the future. We have the multiple primary standardized incidence ratio sessions. It's a mouthful. So MPsir, and it really should be MPsir or SMR. So it's used, it was originally put in to look at multiple primaries, but it's really used for calculating SIRs and SMRs. So it's, you follow a cohort of patients. Typically, you look at a cohort of patients that first primary is something, you follow them through time, and you see if their experience of subsequent cancers, how it compares to the experience in the general population of getting cancer. So do patients that had this type of cancer have an elevated or reduced risk in the future of getting cancer compared to the general population of getting that type of cancer? And you can also look at standardized mortality ratios. So we follow the cohort of patients and see what their death experience is. It's different than survival, where now we're saying, okay, so we follow a cohort of lung cancer patients, and we can see if they experience a higher, or we compare their observed death by type to the general population. So do lung cancer patients have an elevated risk of suicide to the general population? Or do lung cancer patients have an elevated risk of cardiovascular disease death than the general population? And without looking at the numbers, you would think most likely they would have an elevated risk of anything associated with smoking, because lung cancer patients tend to be higher percentage of them smoke than the general population. So there's a lot of things you can look at with that. In that session type, we get observed, the number of events, so how many people got a subsequent cancer, what types, or a death, what we would have expected based on the rates from the general population, the ratio of the two with confidence intervals, excess risk, and other event-related statistics. It also has person and person time statistics. So how many people are we dealing with? person time at risk and cohort related. We can look at it by latency and many different things. And within the session, there's special frequencies and case listings you can do to look at the cohort. And the last session type we added is a very niche type of session. I don't think many people use it yet, but it allows the estimation of net other cause survival. So survival of other causes. Or when I talked about net survival before, so if you have lung cancer, you want to see, well, what's the probability of dying from lung cancer in the absence of other causes? This is taking lung cancer and what's the probability of dying of other causes in the absence of dying of lung cancer. So how would that, what's the likelihood of dying of other causes for this lung cancer cohort? And it's using age at diagnosis as the time axis, as opposed to regular survival, where it's looking at time from diagnosis. This is using age. It's taking into account the left truncated feature, which means we don't have any persons at risk until they're diagnosed with cancer. So we can't start at age 0. We start once we have enough data where people are in our cohort. You can use Kaplan-Meier, actuarial. I'm not going to get into those. And you can compare it to expected. So with my lung cancer example before, you look at lung cancer and do they have a higher survival of other causes or lower survival of other causes compared to the general population? Again, that cohort is probably more likely smokers. And if you look at these numbers, their survival of other causes is much lower than the general population. So when we're working with SEERStat, we need to do several things. First thing we're going to do is select a session. What kind of statistics do we want to calculate? Then we're going to choose a database. Then we're going to define our cohort, make selections. We're going to specify statistics to calculate within that session type. We're going to then specify how we want to stratify the results. And it's really important to distinguish between defining a cohort, say, I only want to look at lung cancer cases, and stratifying it. I want to look at these lung cancer cases by sex or by race. So we define our session, then we execute the session, we get results, and then we can use those results, print, export, graph, and so on. So just to kind of drive that home, and we're going to see it in a minute, we select a session. Here's a rate session. And then we have our tabs down here going down the side. We select our database that we're going to be working with. In this case, I selected SEER 13 database. We specify the statistics of interest. In this case, it's age-adjusted rates, age standardized to the 2000 US population. We make a selection if we want. We subset the data to select the cohort. So we define the cohort for the analysis. Different session types are going to have different common or required selection checkboxes. So there's certain selections that are kind of defaults in different session types, and you'll see the checkboxes at the top for those. And then you'll notice when we get to rate and prevalence sessions, in those session types, we're working with 3 different sources of data: standardizing population data, and then the numerator, case data, or mortality data. And because of that, we'll see 3 different edit boxes. I only showing 2 on my screen here, but 3 different edit boxes to subset the data. If I only want less than 65-year-olds, males, colon cancer, when I subset that, I need to subset the standard populations and all the sources of data based on age. I need to subset the populations and the case data based on sex. And I need to further subset the case data based on colon cancer. So that's why we'll see 3 boxes in the rate session. Table tab. So once we've selected our cohort, this is how we tell SEERStat how we want to see the output, how we want it stratified. So if I want to see the result by age or race or sex or histologic subtype, whatever, I specify that here. And then on the output tab, you can specify titles. You can specify whether you want your rates per 100,000, or maybe if you're working with pediatric cancer per million, how many decimal places to show by default. If you want to suppress based on number of cases and or populations, so you can do those for different confidentiality or stability. And there's some other functionality in SEERStat, the dictionary, which I will be showing. So I'm not going to spend any time on that. The execute buttons to get SEERStat running. So to get SEERStat and to get access to the data, you can go to the SEER website. Both are freely available. You have to do a terms of use agreement to get the software. You have to acknowledge uses of the data to get the data. And there's extra steps for the Research Plus data. But you can get to all of that through the seer.cancer.gov. And if you're interested in trying the new version, the alpha version that I'm going to be demoing in a minute, just send an email to seerstat@imsweb.com and ask us for the installation program. We'll register you and send you the version, and then you'll get emails whenever we have an updated version, which is fairly frequently because we're making a lot of changes to it. Here's some information you can get off of our website, SEERStat and SEER Prep software. Tutorials, we have lots of tutorials. You can always go through the tutorials. The current ones that are available are using the production released version of SEERStat. We are making versions that will be the same tutorials, but using the new interface. We have frequently asked questions, contact information, manuals and documentation, and links to other software. For contact information, I have 3 up here. There's more than that, but the 3 main ones are SEERStat. If you have questions about using the software and some types of data questions, you can come to SEERStat. We'll forward you to the correct person. If we're not the right person, I typically answer most of those. If you're trying to do something, it doesn't seem like what you're expecting. If you send us as an attachment your session file or your matrix file, it really helps. Like, I'm getting these rates and they don't look right. Here's my results. It helps. We recommend typically sending the matrix. However, if it's a case listing, don't send the matrix. That's confidential. It's individual level data. Send the session. But if it's something other than case listing and it's not too large for your email system, send the matrix. Any data questions can go to seerweb@imsweb.com, or if it's really detailed or more for a registrar, we have a link for the cancer registrars to ask them. And that's it for my PowerPoint. So I know Jennifer has been collecting questions that have come in, and we are going to potentially answer a couple of questions before I jump into the webinar, to the actual demo. And some of the questions we won't answer now, we'll wait till the end, especially if we think we're going to cover them in the webinar. So Nadia, I think, might be our asking.
Yes, we are actually getting a lot of questions, so maybe we could take a couple right now, and then if you all would be willing to stick around till the end, we could go over all of them after Steve does the demo. So the first question that came in asked, does SEER 21 also contain data of previous SEER databases? Steve, do you want to take that, or?
So SEER 21, it contains data for all of the registries, all 21 registries, but it only has 2000 plus. It doesn't have the earlier years of data. All of our databases are now fixed years. We don't have varying year databases. We used to, but too many people didn't really know what that meant. So it doesn't have data cases diagnosed prior to 2000. And it also doesn't have the fields that we don't release in the SEER 21 database. So while HER2 status is available in SEER 18, it might not be available in SEER 21. So it wouldn't be available for any registries if it's not in that database.
Okay, thank you. Another question was, well, comment more like, it would be interesting to learn more about SEER incidence-based mortality data in another webinar. Thank you. Yes, as Steve mentioned, we have a few more webinars coming in. For example, on October 28th, we're doing survival. We're doing a SEER variable, in-depth variable related webinar on November 2nd and join point on November 4th. Incidence-based mortality is something we would like to do because we get requests for it, because it's a complicated statistics. We haven't scheduled it yet, but stay tuned. Maybe I'll ask.
Nadia,
Yeah.
So I think I saw a lot of questions regarding requesting research versus research plus, and if there is a cost for research plus, maybe Steve can touch base on that.
There absolutely no cost for any of the data. So SEER Research Plus, unfortunately, the standard way to request SEER Research Plus is currently unavailable. Typically, when you would do that, you would go through what's called an institutional account login, and you would log in either with your HHS credentials, with your PIV card, or you would have to have an ERA Commons account, which anybody affiliated with an institution can get of any kind. And you would just log in, and that would be how we would authenticate the user, and you would get Research and Research Plus access. Currently, that's not available. So you have to go through 2 steps. You get the research data. You still should use your email address that's affiliated with your institution, say who your institution is, and then you go back through the same email address and you just say, I'd like to get access to Research Plus data. You'll have to read and acknowledge some additional things, and you can upgrade as long as the institute's right. We do ask for a signing official. The signing official isn't really obligated to do anything, but this is somebody else from your institute that has kind of legal authority over people. So you would have to do that, but there's no cost.
Another question that I saw a lot was about downloading individual data. Maybe I don't know if you're going to cover that in the presentation, but in the tutorial. But
yeah, so I will. So in the past, we used to make the individual level data available as text files, and we stopped doing that. It has more to do with the different data types and things like that, and that we don't allow certain fields that are in the data to be available in that form at the individual level. And I am going to show a little of that in the case listing. So currently, the only way to get to the individual level data is to use a SEERStat case listing session and export it. And I am going to show an example of doing that today.
So maybe we hold up for now and then move over to the demo part of the webinar.
Sure. And then we'll see if, I'm sure we'll have some time for questions at the end. And of course, if we don't get to all the questions, we will certainly answer them, and they'll be available, I would assume. Jennifer can correct me if I'm wrong, but the questions and answers to them we would make available along with the recordings. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the demonstration. Again, I mentioned it is a alpha version of the software, so I don't expect any issues, but when you least expect it is, I think, what people say. So hopefully I won't have any issues. And I'm going to turn my camera off because I am struggling to not talk with my hands, and that looks funny. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off for this part. And if I can figure out how to do that. Jennifer, I can't find my how to turn my camera off now. That control is gone.
If you go to the top center of your screen, there should be a drop down, a black bar that appears across.
Oh, there it is. Okay, because I'm sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, now I can move my hands and not be too self-conscious. So when we get into SEERStat, this looks a little familiar now because I showed some screenshots, but it has a different look and feel from the past. So across the top here, we can say I want a new frequency session, a new rate session, a new survival session, and the different session types. We have some menus here that look a lot like some of the newer Windows applications you've been working with. I'm on the new session here, the view, help. I'm going to point out the help. There's a lot in the help. Go to the help, it'll bring you our help. In the old version of the software was a compiled help file that was downloaded with the software. Now it's all online. We can update it without releasing a new version, and it's much nicer with a lot more graphics, and it's still being worked on. We're still putting all the formulas in, but it's going to be a huge improvement, I think. So that's what that's going to look like. We have links to go to the SEER website. I click on that. We have links to go to our tutorials. So if I want to go through the exercise, any tutorials, we have tutorials here, and they walk you through step by step how to do things. Tech support, it'll show you all those contacts, different things, bug reporting, things like that. It's really, we've really increased a lot of these things, enhanced a lot of that. We have our FAQs, so we'll bring you right to the web page with our FAQs, the citations, tells you the citation for the software, and it mentions that for each database, there's a unique citation, which we'll see in a little bit, how to get to it, the terms of use of the software that you had to acknowledge when you first downloaded the software is available, and then just the about box, which I won't get into. So that's the general look and feel now, which is a little different, again, for those people that haven't seen the new version. And I think there's probably a fair number of you that have not seen that new version. Put that out of the way. And the first exercise that I'm going to do is going to be with the frequency session. It's going to be pretty, somewhat basic, but I'm going to go through and I'm going to use SEER 21 and I'm going to calculate some different numbers and try to show a couple of things to drive home some of the really basic things about SEERStat whenever working with SEERStat. So I'm going to open up a new frequency session. I'm going to log in. And you can see I'm logging in as a Scoppa 2. I'm logging in with access. The databases you're going to see are all databases that you can get access to. I have access to a lot of other databases, but these are all ones that you can actually get access to with no cost. SEER databases, mortality databases, and the CENA and MPsir USDS public use data. So when I first come up, when I open the session, it asks me to select a database. And in this case, I'm going to use SEER 21 data. And you can see in the name, we have SEER research data. And you'll notice with the 21, it says limited field data, as I mentioned before. And then we get into SEER research plus data. And so additional database, I'm going to go to this research data. I don't need any of the extra variables. And now I'm on the data tab. And we can see for the data tab, the selected database. It's the name of the database. This is linked to county attributes. What it's linked by in the county attributes, the population variables that are available that are linked by. So anything that's county based, it's showing, or geography. The citation I mentioned earlier for the database. Each database has its own citation, and you can just click copy, and it'll just copy it in your Windows clipboard and paste it. So while I talk about the other tabs, I'm just going to go ahead and execute this session. So all I did was open a new session. I haven't changed anything, and I'm going to click execute. It's going to give me a little warning and says, okay, do you want to use summary files? It'll make it go a little faster. Or do you want to use individual records? And if you do individual records, you can get exclusion counts. I'm going to do this time and show what it does. But for the rest, I'll use the summary files. So I'm going to have that running. And now we'll talk about this a little bit. So we have the data tab. We have the statistic tab. On the statistic tab, there's not a whole lot to it. Currently, in the frequency session, there's frequencies and trends. We are very likely removing trends from this because typically, we don't do trends on frequencies. And we're kind of thinking that statistic, if you are, you got to be a little more careful. SEERStat doesn't take into account any kind of standard errors with the frequencies. So joint point would be the better option. So we're likely removing that. You can get percentages, and then these are all applicable only if you were doing trends. We have the selection tab. This is where you subset to select the cohort that you want to work with. Some checkboxes, which are very common, malignant behavior, known age. And these two, which are disabled. And then we have selection statements where we can make other selections and some other options. We're not going to go into great detail of all the functionality with selections. We don't have time for that today, but we will certainly be making some. And I did just want to show that these checkboxes in different databases might have be using different variables. So you can always see what this means by clicking this view statements. And when I do that, I can see, okay, that selection, malignant behavior is selecting behavior code ICD-03 equals malignant. In older versions of the data, it used to select something called behavior recode for analysis equals malignant. And that changes things. So it's important to understand what these selections are. We see this male or female sex is not applicable. This database only has cases that are coded as male or female. Known age is getting rid of unknown age at diagnosis, and cases in research databases. Again, this is not applicable for this database. Some databases it might be. So there's our selections, and then we can build selections. We'll do that in a minute. Table tab, this is where we specify how we want to stratify our results. We have the variables that are available, and we can pick and choose, and each category has different variables. And in a SEER 18 database, there'd be many, many more. Breast subtype is in here. It's the one I mentioned earlier in the limited field. And then our output tab, titles, and frequency session, there's not much else you can do, but you can hide statistics based on fewer than a certain number of cases. So I'm going to go back to that and go over to my results, which popped up while I was talking. And we can see here we have a matrix. All I did was open it up, selected the database, and ran it. So we have 10,628,639 tumors, cases. Okay, if I go to my settings, so that was my matrix. I go to my settings, I can see this is the software that I using, the database that I used. I'm sorry, the data citation, software citation, the database I used, that I did frequencies, that I made these two selections, and we can see the name of the database, frequencies, one count, how long it took to create, when it was created, how many records were read in from my database. So in SEER 21, there were 11.865 million tumors, but I had two checkboxes checked by default: malignant, which excluded 1.2 million tumors, and unknown age, excluding unknown age, 619 cases. So I ended up with this number here. So when that option it gave me to use summary files versus individual records. By using individual records, I could get this report. And if I had added other selections like lung cancer, not diagnosed by death certificate or autopsy only, I would get counts for each of those additional exclusions. And so I could really see, well, what got me to this number? So now I did just a total number. I'll go ahead and close this one. I'm not interested in it. And I'm going to now stratify my results. So I had over 10 million records. I want to see those by cancer site. So when I want to stratify my results, I'm just going to specify a table variable. I don't need to change the selection. I have my cohort of 10 plus million. I just want to change how I see it. So I'm going to use a variable that many of you are probably familiar with, but some might not be, something called site recode ICD-03 WHO 2008. And I'll talk about that while this is running. So I'm going to add this as a row variable. And I'm going to go ahead and execute my session. I will use summary files. So what is this variable? So if I double click on this variable, it brings up the dictionary, which we'll see the dictionary more in the future. I'm on that field because I double clicked it. Hide these for a minute. And I'm going to go ahead and double click it again or click create to see how this variable is defined. So all sites has all these groupings, but you can see all these different groupings of site. This is a variable we use very commonly for our reporting we make available. And for this variable and for many others, we have a description. And if I click on this, oops, it brings up this web page. It's bringing on my other screen. This is the variable, and it shows me exactly how this variable is defined. So this variable is created from site, primary site, and ICD-03 histologic type. So it's looking at site, and it's excluding mesothelioma, kaposi-sarcoma, myeloma, lymphoma, and leukemias, and other hematopoietic cancers. So the data itself has the detailed primary site. It has the detailed histologic types, so you can do it any way you want. Some of these recodes, we call them, are made just to make things a little easier for common ways of looking at it. So while I was talking about that, my matrix came up, and we can see now. So here's the number I saw before, 10,628,639. But now I've got it stratified by site, a cancer site. And you notice the little indenting. That means that these are subtotals and totals. That's how we sometimes show that. And I'm going to come down and we're going to look at lung cancer, because I'm going to continue on and look at lung cancer. And we have 1,342,700. So now I want to show the selection. So now I want to limit my cohort to only lung cancer cases. So I'm going to go back to my session. I'm going to go to my selection tab, and I'm going to make a selection. This is going to look new to you if you've used this before. Click the new line. See all my variables here. I know this variable is in the site and morphology category. Site is equal to, I could say is not equal to, but I'm going to say is equal to. And I'm going to go down to respiratory system, which I think I just passed, and lung and bronchus. Okay. And I can add additional lines. I can group lines, which is like parenthesizing them. I can have different operators, ands and ors between lines. So I can build completely very complicated full Boolean logic statements, but we're not going to do that today. I'm just going very simple here. You can see the statement getting built down here. That looks like an old SEERStat selection statement. And you can actually copy a selection from the old version and paste it into here, and it'll turn it into the new version. So if you're working with both versions, and if you work with the alpha, we recommend using both, it's really easy to copy it over. So we've got now we have our selection statement, and I'm going to go ahead and run this now. So now I've limited my analysis just to lung cancer. But if you were observant, I did not remove site as a table variable. And this is on purpose to show the interaction between the selection and the table. So now if I look at this, we can see that my numbers for all sites is the number of lung cancers, 1,342,700, and I don't have any oral cancers or lip cancers. Respiratory is this, lung is this. So it's really the fundamental getting used to SEERStat really is understanding, subsetting, selecting a cohort. These are the tumors I'm interested in analyzing, and I selected these lung and bronchus cancers, and then stratifying those results. And because I stratified by site recode, which has all of these groupings by default, I can change that, but it has them all by default. That's what I'm going to see in my output. So if you're familiar with SAS, it's like doing a proc anything with the missing option in SAS. It includes all formats, even if there's no cases or you made a selection. So that is one of the biggest confusions using the software. If you get that, it really helps. So I'm going to go back to my session. There's no reason to include this variable in my table. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the lung cancer cohort now, but I'm going to look at it by year, and I'm going to look at it by histologic subtype. So I'm going to go ahead and add to my table year of diagnosis as a row variable. And for histologic subtype, I have to define it. Many variables in SEERStat are set up to work, and they work well when working with any type of cancer. The subtypes, the way we would define subtype for lung cancer is different than how you would define subtype for some other cancer. And we don't have variables for subtype for every different type of cancer. So in a lot of cases, you have to define your own variables. And so we're going to use the dictionary to define that. And in doing so, we are going to define subtype based on the way it's done in some of our websites. with these subtypes. And I'm not going to type these in. I'm going to copy and paste, but I'm just showing them to you now. So we have adenocarcinoma. So to do lung adenocarcinoma, you still have to select lung cancer, primary site, or site recode. But then these are the histologic, the ICD-03 histologies that we use for adenocarcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, small cell, and large cell lung. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the dictionary. The dictionary can be used for looking at how variables are defined and for creating new variables. So I'm going to open up the site and morphology category, and that's where I'm going to find histologies. So histologies are available in two different manners, with behavior and without behavior. With behavior, histologies can have labels. So if I look at ICD-03 hist behavior, I can see we've defined the histologic type behavior combination with a label. We don't do that when you're working with just ICD-03 histology. Instead of all these different values, individual values, we have this, which is just a range. The minimum value for histology is 8,000. The maximum value currently in the data is 9992. It was 9989 not too long ago. And if I were to include this variable in my table, there's only one grouping, I would just get one cell of all histologies combined. So it's not very meaningful. So what I want to do here is I don't want this. I'm going to remove this grouping. And I'm going to add in 4 new groupings based on the histologies I just showed. So I'm going to copy. Those are the histologies. And I want all of those histologies in one grouping, not individuals. And for the label, I want adenocarcinoma. And now I want these groupings. We'll add as a single grouping. Steal that text because I'm not the greatest typist. Paste. And as single, there will be add as a single group. And so these are my different groupings. So adenocarcinoma is defined by these histologies, squamous cell, and so on. If I click OK here, I'll get an error. It says there's already a variable with this name. Can't overwrite the data, the variables that are provided. So I click OK, and I will say subtypes lung. Call it whatever I want, as long as it doesn't already exist. Okay. Now I have a new variable down here in my user defined. These are the variables that I've created in this database. Close. I will add this as a column variable and run that. Oh, and what I forgot to do, and my notes told me to do, is I want to see percentages on this. So I'm going to go back to the statistic tab, and I want to see the percentages, not for each subtype. I don't want the percent by year. Rather, for each year, I want the percent by subtype. So subtype is a column variable. So if I want percentages on my column variable, I specify row percentages. Sounds counterintuitive, but we followed SAS's lead on that. So I'm going to execute that. I do have this saved, but it's far enough along that by the time I go open it, I might as well just let this finish running. If anybody's really familiar with SEERStat will notice that this server that I'm connecting to is not the server you're connecting to. Once we get a little further along, we will have different servers running. This is an internal one, but you will have to change. You'll be able to have both versions of the software running and connect to different servers. I'm not going to get into the details. That's a little advanced here, but you will be connecting. You won't be using this SEERStat 2, but you will be using a different. You will have a different URL, host name, and server. And while this is running, I did notice one person said every time we release a new version, they need their IT staff. And while I'm showing that, I guess I'll bring that up. You do need IT staffs to help with installs, and that's a little annoying. And we give a little warning that we're releasing a new version. And we're hoping with the new version, the new installations, that we'll be able to get away from that. And down the road with our new protocol, we will be connecting to the server a little different. We're hoping to clean a lot of that up. So for that one, I know I saw that one pop up, so just wanted to throw that out there. We realize, and we are sympathetic with the fact that you need admin privileges to install the software. We do have some options to use, and you can always email us. We have FAQs about it, but sometimes you can't go there. Maybe I should have opened this. I apologize. By the time let's see. So I'm doing lung cancer. Here are my results. So the other one will pop up while I'm showing this, but now we can see the matrix. We have counts with the year total, because that's what's in the variable, and individual years by our 4 subtypes. We also have a total. Oh, I left site in my table, so not year. So good thing I did that. Here is the correct results. I think I made a mistake when I set that up. So as I said, individual years, and by default, we have a total in the year. This total I didn't include in my variable. It was added automatically because I included percentages. You'll notice that the count here does not match our 1.3 or so million lung cancers. And that's because these 4 histologic subtypes don't define all lung cancers. These are commonly looked at, but there are other histologic types that aren't anywhere in here. And if I wanted to look at those, there are easy ways to get to those in SEERStat, but I'm not going to do that here. So I have my matrix. I'm going to go and now look at this in graphing, because we haven't seen that before. And this graph by default is a little overpowered here by something, which is the total year. So I'm going to go to my settings for my graph over here, this little wheel, and I'm going to turn off the total for year of diagnosis. Also, the little markers for the points don't really help here, so I'm going to turn those off. And now we have a nice looking bar chart. The total is kind of overpowering. So I'm going to turn off the total. And I can look at a bar chart or a column or a line graph over time of the histologic types. So this is totally new to SEERStat. If you've used it in the past, you didn't have this, you have to copy it and paste it into Excel to start to get a feel for, do things look like they make sense? So I think that it's a great feature that I think a lot of people are excited about. So that's the end of my frequency exercise. I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to go down to just one window, even though these are all separate windows, as I said. And I'm just going to go from here, and I'm going to go to the new session tab. And this is also a little different. And I'm going to do a rate session. And you'll notice it's not changing my frequency session. It's going to generate a new session. When I do this, I'm going to select SEER 9 research data. This is talking about the behavior change I mentioned earlier, that we switched to behavior SEER3 from behavior recode for analysis. I'm going to check that to not see it in the future and click OK. And you notice it created a new session. It didn't change the session I'm in from frequency to rates. So I'm going to go ahead and close the frequency session I was working with, just so I don't get confused and select the wrong one. So for this exercise, for my rates, I'm going to use SEER 9, and I'm going to look at, I'm using this as an opportunity to show something we call merged variables. We're trying to cover a lot, and the merged variables I want to go through somewhat quickly. So we're going to use a really simple example of what is a merged variable. Merged variables can be very complex, and merged variables are basically defining a new variable based on multiple variables, one or more. You could create a complicated stage variable using EOD fields for a particular cancer site. It can be very complicated. This case is just a real simple example to show how it works. So I'm going to look at rates for lung cancer for both sexes combined, male prostate cancer, and female breast cancer. And I'm going to look at it by year. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the tabs. We selected SEER 9. One thing I really want to point out, because a lot of people don't realize this, is in the SEER data, we have the incidence databases linked by default to populations and standardizing populations by a variable called age recode with less than 1-year-olds. This variable is defined as 0, 1 to 4, 5 to 9, 5-year age groups up to 85 plus. But available in the databases is also single ages. So you can switch to single ages. Typically, we don't switch to single ages if we're looking at rates for all ages or for less than 50 plus. It would change the age adjusted rate because you'd be age adjusting by more age groups. Typically, we use single ages when the default age group doesn't allow you to select the cohort of interest. If you're looking at pediatric cancer and you want it to be less than 18, you can't do that with this default age variable, but you can with single ages. So that is available. I'm going to use the default. Statistic tab, we have rates, age adjusted as the default. It's the most common thing. We do have other statistics available. Here we get to select things, p-values for any significance testing we're doing, the age variable. So even though I'm working with 19 age groups, I could use broader age groups for age adjusting if I wanted to, because it was unstable or anything like that. I could define a new variable based on this. I won't get into that. Standard population, we provide, along with the data, many different standard populations to use for age adjusting. The default is the 2000 US standard population, but we have ones all the way back every decade back to 1940 from the US, and we have several versions of world and Canadian and Europeans. Most important thing about picking a standard is if you're comparing to other rates, you want to use the same one and the same age groups. So I'm going to go with this as the most common one used in the US. A lot of these other statistics here have to do with if I was producing trends, whether we want to do rate ratios. I'm going to go ahead and include standard errors and confidence intervals. I can include the standard populations in the results, but I'm not going to do that. So I've got this set up. I'm going to move to my selection, and we can see I have, as I mentioned, 3 edit boxes instead of 1. We still have the check boxes up here. And again, if I make a selection on age 65 plus, it's going to subset the standardizing populations, the populations at risk, the census populations, and the case data, in this case, SEER incidence data. Then I can make selections on fields like race, sex, year, geography that would subset the population data and the numerator data. And then lastly, other variables that are not population defining in this database. You might use, if I were to select a detailed race variable, that theoretically is population defining, but this database doesn't have it, doesn't have populations by that. And it would actually tell you and not let you get rates, you can only get counts. So the selection here is, the only selection I'm going to make is on cancer site. And I said I was going to select, I'm working with lung and bronchus, and breast, and I'm going to use my control key select non-contiguous and prostate. See my selection down here and click OK. Okay, so now I have my selection. And on my table tab, again, I want to see the three. I just want to see those three statistics. But what I'm going to go ahead and define my merged variable and run it. And then while that's going on, I'm going to show how another way I could have gotten to those. So I'm going to pull up a saved matrix. So I'm going to go to my dictionary. And when you go to a dictionary, you can pick a field and create a new variable where you can click merge. And merge is quite different. And I give it a name, and I'm going to call it lung, female breast, male prostate. I'm going to add a grouping. First grouping, I'm just going to define as lung. And notice I did not select both sexes. I didn't need to. I also didn't select all races or all ages or anything else. I'm defining this based on site. And each grouping in a merge variable can use different variables. They don't have to all use the same. So my next grouping is going to be female, breast, add a final grouping, male, prostate. And it's very important that I define this as male prostate. In the incidence data, there's only going to be prostate cases in men. But if I don't define it as male prostate, I gave it the same name as I used before. If I don't define it as male prostate, the populations, the denominators, are going to be both sexes. So I'm going to call it new. I'm consistent. I use the same name. So I'm going to close. I'm going to add. You notice I now have a merged variable category. I'm going to add that as a column variable. I'm going to add year as a row variable. Output tab, I'm not going to spend any time. I could type in titles and change things. I'm just going to get this executing. And while that's executing, I'm going to go ahead and open up a saved version of this. So I will go to the open, computer, browse. So this is, oh, before I actually show that, I'm going to open up the alternate way. So I did rates by site and sex. So instead of doing a merge variable with three groupings, I could have done two variables, site, a user-defined site variable, which is three groupings, by sex. And instead of getting three statistics that I wanted, both sexes, lung and bronchus, female breast, and male prostate, I would get more. Some are a little misleading, female prostate rates. Some are burden measures, I'm not going to get into that, but prostate rate in both sexes. And that's not what you want. If you give this to somebody, they'd be kind of confused. So we're going to use the merge variable. But one thing I wanted to highlight about this is I just opened up this matrix that I created earlier. And if somebody sends me this matrix, I can get to their session by clicking the retrieve session. And this is really important with SEERStat. We don't typically save sessions or send sessions. We keep the matrix. And when I retrieve that, we can see we have the database selected, the statistics I used, my selections, my table variables. Those table variables are in my database, and so on. So the session, as it was when you executed the session, is stored within your matrix, and you can always get it back. And if you send that matrix to someone, you're also sending them the session. So we can see those, and then while mine finished and came up, and here are the results. So now I can see I have by year lung cancer, female breast, and male prostate rates. I'm going to go ahead and look at that graphically because I think it's easier to grasp than looking at all of these numbers. So I'm going to go to the graph option. And as I did before, I'm going to go make some quick changes. I'm going to turn off those point markers. I don't think they help in this case. I'm going to turn off the total year, although it's not that bad looking here because it's rates. But if I go to a switch to line, I can see this first point looks funny, and that's because it's a total. So I'm going to turn that off. And now I can see my incidence rates. Nadia showed mortality rates earlier for lung cancer. Here are the incidence rates for lung cancer. If we want to look at just lung cancer, certainly turn these off and get a better feel for it. Turn things back on. As I mentioned before, we can export the graphs and save them as different formats that you can put into different places. One other thing I wanted to show with this rate matrix, and I want to make sure I'm keeping up on time, is when working with the matrix, in addition to copying the graph and saving it somewhere, the matrix itself, the results, you might want to take these results and put them into Excel and do something else with them. So I'm going to show how to do that. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, well, I want more precision on these statistics. To do that, I'm going to select a column that's of this type. So these rate, standard error, they're all showing the same precision. And right click on the header, filter. We might change that name in the future, and I want to see 4 decimal places. You'll notice it changed that, and all statistics that SEER feels should be displayed with the same precision. We still see our count and our population. Let's say I'm not interested in seeing the population when I copy it. I can go to my display options and I can turn off my populations and they go away. And now I'm going to click copy. I only have one page here. I didn't stratify with any page variables. So page and all pages would be the same, but I'll copy the page. And I'm going to open up Excel. And I'm going to go to a second sheet. And I'm going to enable paste. And here are my results. And these results by themselves might not mean a lot because I don't know what they are. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to SEERStat and I'm going to copy once more session information. And I'm going to go back to Excel and I'm going to paste again. And now I have everything I did to generate those rates. I have my software and data citation. I have the database name. I have the statistics, everything I did on the statistic tab, the selections I made, table variables, because this is a user-defined variable, how I defined that variable, output options, and some other information. So it's fully documents exactly what's over here in this sheet. And the last thing I wanted to show, but I am a little tighter on time, so I'm just going to open it up and show it, just to kind of drive this home, is I mentioned the mortality databases. So you can generate mortality rates, and I did that, and you would have access to these too. So here are the mortality rates, US mortality rates for the same cancers. Again, I could have done non-cancers, but for the same cancers. And if we were to look at that, it's a line graph without the marks. If we were to turn off these, we can see Nadia's graph from earlier. Although this one is going from 75 to 2019, where her earlier one was a little different. And that was very easy to create. I did the same thing. I just used a rate session, but I selected a mortality database. not an incidence-based mortality database. So when I look at this change selected databases, we can see we have incidence databases, and then below that, mortality databases. So that's it for my rate matrix. And I have one last exercise with case listing, and I'm going to try to do that fairly quickly and have a little bit of time for questions. So for case listing, I think this one should go pretty quick. What I want to do is I want to make a selection of Iowa, just randomly picked, female malignant breast cancer cases diagnosed in the most recent 5 years available in the data. So I'm going to go ahead and do a new case listing session. I know Iowa's in SEER 9. It was one of the first registries. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And I'll close this other one. And the first thing I'm going to do is go over to my selection tab and see I can't select Iowa. Registry should be here, but it's not. I used a SEER Research database, not a SEER Research Plus database. One of the variables that's only available in the Research Plus data are geographic variables. So I've got to cancel here. Back to the data tab, change databases. So if I went to SEER Research Plus 9 registry, you would think I could do this, but I can't. And the reason is because that database has partial registries for California and Georgia, and would allow you to get to partial registries for states that we have whole registries. It's kind of confusing, but that's the fact. So I'm going to go to the SEER 18 database, which has all of California and all of Georgia. And then I'm going to make my selection. And when I make my selection, it's very important when I'm doing it on geography. I can't use SEER registry because that would have let me get to sub-states for states that we have whole. I have to use in this geographic locations, SEER registry with California and Georgia as whole states. When I do that, I can select Iowa, I can select my other fields, female, year of diagnosis, breast cancer. Okay. Now I can go to my table tab and I want to add some variables to include, and I'm just going to include a handful. I'm going to add age recode. I could add a single age variable. There is an age variable single ages up through 99 down in the race and age category, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to add all variables from this category just to show two things, that you can add a whole category at once, and to show a warning we're going to get in a minute. I'm going to also add histologic subtype, and I'm going to use the labeled histology behavior variable. Find it, malignant version, I'm only including malignant. And then I want to add in some of the other special breast fields, breast subtype, R2. I don't know where they are. And I really do, but let's say I don't. I'm going to use the find and type in breast. And I will start to see any labels or variables that have that in the string. So there's breast subtype. And I click it and it brings me, and that's in the extent of disease folder. So I'll add breast subtype, ER status, and derived HER2. These variables are only available for diagnosis years, 2010 plus, 1990 plus, 2010 plus. Any year range in parentheses at the end of the variable means that variable is only available for those diagnosis years. So now I'm going to execute this. I'm going to run this. I get a warning. I'm going to let it, well, I'll talk about the warning. So what is it saying? It's saying alert the following variables. SEER registry, Louisiana, half year, county, cannot be used in a case listing. So there are some variables, as we mentioned before, that are available in a database. This is the same database that's available in the rate session, but is not available at the individual level in the case listings. So we can't include these in our table. So I'm going to click yes, and it's just going to, it's not going to take them out of the table, but it's not going to show them in our results. Again, there are some fields that due to confidentiality, while even in the Research Plus you can get to them, you can't get them at the individual level. Down the road, we may have a way to do it with IRBs. We don't know. That's a process we haven't gotten to yet. But for right now, that's how it is. While that's running, I'm just going to pull up the saved version of that. And that was my case listing. Here's what it's going to look like when it finishes. It has one record for each tumor record. These aren't people, these are tumor records. A person can have multiple tumors. We could have included patient ID if we wanted to know if any patient was in here more than once. I didn't. I'm going to export this data, and if I'm going to export it, I probably don't want it. There's the new version. I'll use the saved. I don't want labels in the raw data. I want values. So I'm just going to go to highlight all columns. Again, I'm going to right click on any column, display as unformatted. And now I just have numbers instead of labels. Then I would typically save this matrix like this. This one is saved, but not saved as unformatted. I can always go back and forth. And I'm going to export these results. It's going to create a text file with the data, a dictionary, and I'm going to have it, in this case, create a SAS program to read this data back in. You use SAS, this is without question the easiest way to get the data into other software. But if you don't use SAS, let's say you use Stata, you want to use a CSV file, we have a button down here, CSV defaults, and it would change the extension to CSV. It would go by default to comma separated. And it would add the variable names at the beginning of the data. So there's a lot of different things here. I'm just going to go back to defaults with SAS, call it .txt, export. I'm going to overwrite the 3 files I created earlier. I'm going to show these 3 files I just created, and then we will take questions. So we created a text file, which is just, I did tab delimited, the raw data. Dictionary file has information about that text data, including the formats. So what do those values mean? And lastly, webinar SAS program with our proc formats. Jump down to the bottom. All the formats are input and our format statements. So a very easy way to take the data and analyze it with other software. So I believe that's it. And I was supposed to leave 10 minutes for questions, and we have 9. So pretty close. So I think that's it for the presentation. Nadia, Jennifer, if you want to come in and try to answer questions. I did see a lot popping up. We'll get through what we can.
Thanks, Steve. That was really quite excellent. There are actually a lot of questions. So I don't know how many we could go through, but we could start with a few. There was actually quite a few people wondering about the documents required to get SEER Plus account. I think you touched on it, Steve, but maybe it would be helpful to go over it one more time. And also there were some questions about like the different variables that are available in SEER 18 versus 21. I know we have a matrix of different variables for different databases. So if you
let me
show it,
share my screen again then.
Yeah.
I stopped and now I want to share again. Okay, so if I go into SEERStat, and I go to the get a session up. Got my database select. Let me see where this is. I think it's in this version. So, okay, so on the select database, if I go to view more database details, this is really what you want to look at for one of those questions. If I do that, it's going to take me to a web page for documentation for that submission of databases. And in there, it has information about the databases. It shows you each database available in every session type, the number of records, all kinds of information, geographies covered. But also at the top, there is I want to make sure I get the right one, a data dictionary in PDF and Excel. I said that backwards, Excel. And I can pull that up. And I can see which variables are in the data with links to documentation, whether those data items are in research limited fields, that's SEER 21, and research plus limited field. And the fact that it's in the spreadsheet means it's in the research plus non-limited field. It's only in here if it's released in that biggest available data. And I could limit, so which fields are not in the limited field. I can look at that and see exactly which fields aren't. And again, we have a meeting coming up for the next submission. Some of these might change. So for right now, this is what it is. But this document shows you all the fields, what it's available in, whether it's available in case listing, if it's a NACER data item, the NACER item number. So it has a lot of information. It's very easy to get to from SEERStat. The other question, when you're submitting a request for the data, I go to just the SEER website, I know I can get to these. And I go to the SEER data, more about the data. If I go to data agreements and limitations, I can see what I need to agree to and what the limitations are. If I'm getting research data, I need to agree to and initial the SEER research data agreement. This is not a real copy for me to do, but it's showing me exactly what's in it. When I go request the data, it would make me initial it. And then if I want to get the research plus, I think actually with the research data, I might also have to agree to the best practices and assurance for securing NCI supported registry data, which is here. You can read all about it. It's long, it's legal. And if I'm getting the research plus, I have to do the extra acknowledgement of the treatment data limitations. So I'm reading. One of our presenters is Annie Noon. She was very involved in a publication about the completeness of some of the research, some of the treatment fields, and how they're not very complete in some cases, but if used the right way, they can be meaningful. And so it talks about biases and things like that, and using these variables. So this is the extra agreement you need to initialize. As I said, you also need to specify a signing official for your institute and things like that. So there's that extra thing. So hopefully I answered those two questions.
Yeah, that was very good, Steve. Thank you. You actually gave an example with case listing, but a question is it possible to request access to personal level research plus data for analyzing in other platforms like SAS outside of SEERStat?
Well, hopefully, hopefully that question came in before I did the case listing, because I showed exactly how to create the SAS program. Currently, there is no way to get access to the fields that are in the Research Plus that aren't available in the case listing. SEER is working on other things for down the road where there's going to be a shared environment to access longitudinal data and other things. And maybe through that, you'd be able to get to these fields that that you would want to be able to use through other software, but not actually look at the individual level data. But for right now, unfortunately, you can't include those fields like county in the extra data to use for other analyses.
Thank you. And a lot of people are asking when the new SEERStat version could be available for public.
So as I mentioned in the PowerPoint, it is available as an alpha version today. You can get it anytime. Just email us, we'll send it to you. You can use it. Alpha typically means we know there are issues. Beta, when we get to beta, we're less sure that there are issues, but there definitely could be. And then production. I don't think this is going to be the production version and take down the other one for a little while. I don't know if it's going to be a year or how long, but we want people using this. But we want people using this and using the other to make sure there's not a bug and they report the bugs. So please use it. Please verify that you get the exact same results. You can open a session saved in this version, in the other version, and vice versa. So you can create a session, save it, open the other version, look, does it look right? Run it, you get the same answers. Because it's a big undertaking redoing this, and we want people using it. The more using it, the quicker we can get all these things fixed. I mean, we fixed a couple of bugs in the last 3 days because I was preparing my exercises. So please use it, but just make sure things look reasonable and report everything. Even if you think you made a mistake, let us know.
Thank you. There's a question about the specialized databases. When do you anticipate the specialized database from November 2020 submission will be available?
Excellent question. I wish I knew. We're still trying to iron out details of what they're going to look and feel like. In the past, we had like a prostate specialized database with watchful waiting, and it was only prostate cases for 2010 forward, and it had the watchful waiting variable, active surveillance. We've decided in the future, we're going to make it a SEER, say 18 or SEER 20, SEER 18 database with 2000 to 2018 data that has all cancer sites, and it has the watchful waiting field and some other fields, NCCR and risk factor and things like that for prostate cases with diagnosis year 2010 plus. But we're still ironing out the details. It'll allow you to do a lot more things with the data. You could look at person histories and things and do more things with it. We're hoping it's in the next several weeks, but I can't make any promises.
Okay. I think we will do one more question and then we should perhaps wrap up. So what are the key differences of SENA plus USCS databases compared to SEER Research Plus?
So the SENA plus USCS and SEER Research Plus, the SEER research data has many more fields and is available in survival and rates and things like in survival, prevalence, MPsir. The USCS database is only available in frequencies and case listings, but it's the total US. It's not SEER only. It's NPsir registry data and SEER registry data. It's the number of fields is much fewer. I think it's probably fewer than in our limited SEER 21 data, but it's giving you the total US. So if you're just looking at rates over the last several years by cancer site, it's US. It's not limited to SEER. Like I said, a lot fewer fields and only available in certain session types. And that would be true for the NASER database, the NASER public use database also.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you, Steve and Nadia, for a great presentation and demonstration this afternoon. I want to thank all of our attendees for a lot of questions that you submitted, and I know we weren't able to get to all of those. Please note that the recording from today's webinar, along with the presentations, will be available online. We'll be sending out email communications once posted to everyone who had registered. We will make our best effort at trying to answer some of those questions through an FAQ doc if possible. Again, we may not be able to get to everyone, but we will try to consolidate as much as possible. And with that, thank you so much again for your time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.